waiting a moment for our AD to return. Just for fun, I'll say that's the picture of Pablo Picasso from the Picasso Museum in Barcelona. I may have made a selection for reasons. So usually I have pictures. So I always put in the pic that I take. I usually do buildings or this like cityscapes, usually at night. I have cityscapes, but I figured from this trip, but I figured I'd. This is as creative as I get. All right, I'm going to charge ahead in a moment. Whether see, there you go. Whether Gory makes it back in the room or not. All right. Here's the note. Well, typically on a Friday, I'd say everyone's seen this before, but since I know of you, a bunch of you are one-day only folks, I'll do the version of here's the note. Well, take a look, and I'm not supposed to edit. Did this actually? One of them did change. There was a small change from. Welcome. Was a small change from. I don't know if it was on this or if it was on this. So note really well, treat each other well. There's an ombudsman if there are issues that you can go speak to. So I'll do that. Dave, we'll get. I denied your slide share. We'll get to that if you want to share. Here's the agenda. I will happily allow agenda bash. I took away times. The times didn't seem to be super aligned to the chairs had it discussed in version of reality, but this is our general approach to how we're going to go through the talks. But there's going to be a little bit of extended status. So current status. This is what we have for adopted documents, and some below that, some chair observations. I'll leave it up there for a second. Brian, do you want to comment at all, or want me to go through it? Dave, you're in queue. Go ahead. All right, Brian, do you have anything?
Please go through it and I'll comment at the end. I think you're going to say what I was going to say anyway.
Yeah, so we really want to move internationalization out of the kind of the last call. Dave, if you can get your microphone on, you're welcome to jump in, assuming it's about working group status. So currently internationalization includes reference to 5661, which has been obsoleted by 8881. Hoping that might resolve some of the split in the working group about how far back internationalization should go. And I will note kind of the same observation about our adopted document of 5661 bis. It should probably be 8081 bis, since 8081 kind of formally says it obsoletes 5661. I'm interested in any comments from the working group about the, kind of GitHub workflow or some of the struggles to review it. So I've had some pairwise conversations with members and making it through the unclear what Dave is. Sorry, Dave's also emailing me saying he's having some issues. Yeah, this is not how this is supposed to work. Okay. Does anybody have any comments on ways to make some progress on that document with the do we believe, kind of breaking it down into issues, doing PRs, and kind of attacking it more piece by piece would be helpful. I know, Brian, you've been trying to plow through.
Yeah, I've been doing a hand edit of 5661 bis, trying to see what the final document will look like. And there's a lot of material that needs to leave. It's not normative text, if that's the proper term. It's kind of discussions around what happened in the past and what the issues are, but they're not, it makes it hard to kind of read what I'm actually, if I was going to say, yes, approve, what I'm approving, the discussion about the history or the actual material. So it kind of muddles it. So I'm really would like to go to the GitHub workflow. I don't want to lose any of the information, but if you check this into GitHub, then I would feel a lot more confident about editing out materials, since we will have it and also a record of what materials are moved. And I think that material probably needs to go into some informational document to accompany the spec. That because it explains what the changes were and why you should care. There's a lot of stuff in there that Dave's put in that's probably good to capture, but not in the actual RFC itself. So I would rather do that with GitHub, because it's going to require multiple people working on it to go through to get to the final state of the document. Any questions on that one?
Well, we've got a queue, so our AD would like to comment.
Go ahead, I'll join at the end of the queue.
Fair enough. I would like to note that we got some help from Karsten to do a conversion of the XML document as it was into Markdown, so that to more enable the GitHub workflow, just as a kind of chair's comment. Go ahead, Chris.
So I just want to chime in on BP's comments. It's like all that history and rational discussion definitely needs to move out of the main document, totally independent of the workflow. And I'm honestly not sure it's even worth a working group document, but I won't complain if we have a separate document.
Fair enough. Point taken.
Gorifa as AD, I might well complain if it's another working group document that doesn't have any use. But seriously, in GitHub, it's easy enough to place it in another file and keep it all, so we don't have to lose it. And we can make lots of issues. So, I mean, we've been in a bit of a deadlock here, but I really see we can have a lot more churn if we have GitHub and we make sure that we make issues for everything. And then we publish revs quite frequently after we've done a little bit, so that people can actually keep up and see what's going on, but we keep those issues in the background so that they don't confuse us, and maybe we can focus and move on and complete all the stuff. So if we can, I think this is a useful tool. Some working groups love GitHub, other working groups don't. I don't know any working groups that really hate the idea of having an issue tracker and trying to put all the issues in and making sure they know how they're going to resolve them. So that part should hopefully be useful to everybody, even those who don't want to play with GitHub. At least you get these issues and you know how they're going to be resolved and what text is going to change. So using a tracker for this would be really good.
Tom?
Tom Ames. Just wanted to point out what most of the other drafts are in GitHub. So.
So yeah, Christoph Helvig should have introduced myself last time. I mean, I still have the same reservations about GitHub, not Git, as in that it requires a globally visible account with an evil empire. But the Git workflow itself, and a lot of drafts use Git without having to rely on a central source, absolutely in favor, and I don't understand how people work without it.
I just wanted to kind of make a note that sorry, Chris Anasio, chair hat off. I just want to make a note that, we have adopted kind of Martin's automations and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know that anybody in the group started out as any kind of expert. We are leveraging as much as we can of the things, I'm probably speaking for Tom when he's in the room, so unnecessarily, but feedback he's given me has been positive as to the kind of the workflow and able to use that. So sounds like there's some motivation there. The chairs have been, and by the chairs I mean Brian in this particular case, has been trying to figure out how to crack that nut if we can. All right, I think we've covered that topic. I'm going to move forward. So this goes back to kind of comment on the list as to what it means for adoption of these documents. And so this is the 7221 actual text. You're welcome to read it. It's also on the mailing list. I'm not going to dwell on this slide so much, but this is kind of the guidance for adopting a document, and kind of less formally as a chair. This is kind of how I look at it. I'm not looking for everybody to be 100% happy with the text that's presented as an adoption. The bottom parts are what's really the kind of most important to me, right? Which is sufficient editor motivation, i.e., we're not going to adopt a working group document and it's going to make no progress, and sufficient review engagement. So enough of the working group is willing to review a document and make progress on it. That said, I would like to say I don't want to adopt documents knowing they're not going to not progress, but it's okay if not every document does progress. So this kind of 2-slide set will then lead us into where do we stand with some of the document adoption that was on the list that the chairs didn't kind of close out. This is the chair kind of assessment of what we saw for conversation and consensus as we saw it, as we judge it on the list. I'm open to comments if people think that this isn't the right assessment of what we saw on the list. I'm going to take silence as agreement. And so with that, I think we will be adopting POSIX draft ACL right after the meeting. We will adopt Uncacheable right after the meeting. I will comment. The minor disagreement was with Chuck Lever, who's not in the, not with us today. That said, there were some private emails where he commented that he's okay, given that it's not a finished document. I'll also note kind of ACL's Dave, I'd love for you to post some more comments on there and kind of start a little bit of a more of a gauge kind of motivation of the group. Go ahead, Dave, you're in queue. All right, Dave, we're not hearing you.
When is it select this talk? That's his problem. He doesn't know how to. Maybe Brian can help him. I've never done it.
Yeah, there's a mic at the bottom of the.
If the remote participants are having problems with their mic, they could use the chat tool and we could get the question into the group,
Yeah.
I think.
I'm monitoring the chat window as well. Dave will come back to it if you can either put it in chat or figure out mic issues. All right. At the last meeting, we talked about kind of versions of that we're going to support. I showed the kind of dependency graph, and we talked about you kind of getting a wiki together that also describes some of the structure of NFS, the RPC mechanisms, and where the security kind of layers and that kind of stuff were. I will say I have updated the wiki on the data tracker. It no longer goes to a 404 page on track that the IETF no longer runs. It's nascent, so I think looking at that little screenshot on the side, you are currently seeing the entire bit of the wiki, and I will note that as a Confluence user, GitHub Wiki apparently is not Confluence, and so my ability to manage pages needs to, I will figure it out, but I was attempting to manage it like Confluence, and that's not going to work. The data tracker wiki is now up to date. It's also in GitHub. I'm using GitHub for the wiki, so everything can be version controlled on the wiki as well. This is, as I mentioned, GitHub Wiki's a little bit new for me, but I'm happy for everyone to participate in doing updates. I don't know if I've made the repo available so that anybody can edit, but I'm happy to do so. And I think with that, we are now on to our agenda. All right, close this deck. And Tom, you are up.
Hi. So I didn't know the status of the adoption call, but let's go forward. Oh, do I get that? We had the adoption call out, and one of the consensus items seemed to be we want two attributes, one for the directory entries, the metadata, and one for the file. And the other question is, does this warrant having two drafts instead of one? I personally don't care. It's just the same amount of work for me, but what's the consensus with the working group?
Christopher Helvig again. I think two is saner, right? I mean, except for vaguely dealing.
I'm sorry, two attributes or two drafts?
Two drafts. I was just going to explain it in a sentence or two. Except for using the term uncacheable, there seems to be absolutely nothing in common. So I think having separate drafts and maybe picking a different name than uncached for one of them would be a good idea, but that's something we can easily do after adoption.
Okay, thank you. Is there someone else?
I was in queue, but Christoph pretty much covered what I was going to
Well,
comment
that's still
on.
another vote, so.
My comment was I dropped myself from queue. I'll quickly add myself back in queue. Okay, not as chair. Chris Ignacio, as long as the attributes are sufficiently unrelated to drafts. What I'm nervous about is what it looks like in the end about, you know, I don't know that we need two drafts that are massively circular referenced to one another. And that's why, if that's the case, then I would say one draft. But if they're separable enough, two.
Okay. I'll start editing and see what I've got to one or two. Bike shedding moment. I don't care about the names. Does anyone care about the names? Send me email later if you care, because we're going for two. Uncacheable metadata, uncacheable data. The other point raised in the reviews was where's a reference for access-based enumeration? And I'll have to dig that up. And how does this interact with directory delegations? So I'll have to go and address that issue too. So I didn't necessarily reply to not reviews, but the responses on the mailing list, but I will be taking them into consideration when I make the next draft. And that's it.
Stupid question. What was the name of the draft that you had wrote when you were
well, you're asking me to uncacheable attribute.
that was what it was called, was it? Was the uncacheable stuff in a draft when it was put for adoption?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's called uncacheable, is it?
Yep, it's Haynes. Haynes uncacheable.
Just checking.
All right, so or you want to go ahead? All right, so the next presentation is erasure coding, building on the basics. Last meeting it was talking about what the basics were, so we've progressed. And I wanted to start, before I start off, I wanted to reintroduce some terms. Integrity is, or consistency is, of all the chunks. So the erasure coding is like Reed Solomon, where we're writing chunks to the DSs, and a payload is consistent if all contained chunks have the same guard. It has integrity if they are consistent and they all pass the CRC 32 checks. So I went back and I looked at the slides. Oh, it should be from 122. And the last slide is we were talking about we're going to start thinking about chunks and not blocks or bytes. And we were going to do append mode to persistent storage. And, reads come first from the data file and not then the append file. And as chunks are confirmed, they're written to the data file. And I had some issues with this in that we're pretty much dictating how the protocol is implemented. We're not, so we've been arguing implementation and not the protocol. And Brian kind of drove this point home with me a month or two ago in an offline discussion about why am I trying to tell us how we implement so that we can argue about it instead of telling us what the protocol is and leave the implementation up to the implementers. So what are the important parts of this draft. The important parts are that the clients can raise some rights that unlike the traditional NFS, the last writer wins doesn't work because the last on DSA might not be the first on DSC and vice versa. So, and then also each DS leaves at least a history of one of the prior contents of a chunk. And since we're going to be doing distributed consensus, we want to avoid all of the voting on who's going to be the judge. We want to avoid any decisions on how we make the chunks consistent. We want to have a well-known approach that eliminates all of the chatter for the distributed consensus making. So there's two opposing approaches we can take on the DS. And one is, actually we can take in general. One is we split the logical and physical mapping and the MDS maintains the mapping. One of the big advantages is it's really easy to implement the last consistent writer wins, all right? Another is that the consistency resides on the MDS and not the DSs, so I don't have to go query the DSs. The big con is we have to do a mapping recall to all the DSs to update the logical and physical mapping, which gets expensive as we scale the number of clients. The other one is either do a swap file or append only file on each DS. The big con on it is it's hard to ensure that the last consistent writer wins. So I'm reading slides, I'm getting bored. What we want to do is we want to set the requirements for the DSs. We want to differentiate between the finalized and non-finalized chunks. I was going to say committed, but we've already gone through in a prior discussion where committed is overused because it's also meant to flush or sync the data to disk. A write to a finalized chunk makes the chunk non-finalized, and then a subsequent read will get the non-finalized chunk, not the finalized one. No, it gets the prior finalized chunk, not the writes to a non-finalized chunk will result in locking the chunk, i.e. we don't want the scenario where we start writing to A, B, and C with client 1, and then D, E, F from client 2, and then we have to, we want to have either one client wins or the other client wins. How does it do it? Really, I'm trying to just drive home the point. I don't care. It's not relevant. And then a list of new operations that do that are the protocol. And once the protocol is enacted, we don't care what the DS does. Oh. I don't want. You can read the operations yourself. It's really, yeah. And do we really need two phases even in the happy path? Oh, Christos has a question. You want to? Okay. I was going to put a sequence into the chunk write. I realized why overload chunk write. We'll just have chunk finalize. And I think the last slide is just informational. No, that's it.
Yeah, so Christoph, again, I'd really like to take a couple, not just one step back, but a few. And I think one of the points, we talked a bit about this in person this week, is one big problem you're trying to solve, and you mentioned it earlier, is clients concurrently writing to the vaguely defined same range, which could end up in the same stride. Now, NFS has traditionally done close to open consistency and with delegations we can get a little better. But I mean, I think the first thing we need to figure out is how do we even define the semantics of concurrent overlapping-ish writers in NFS. And before we do that, we'll just keep running against a wall trying to figure out how to make parity stripes work. So maybe the first step is to actually probably do another draft, or I don't know, maybe it fits into your uncacheable data, but not really. Figure out what are the boundaries on which we can easily support concurrent writers, and what happens if concurrent writes from different clients happen inside such a range. And that's not a new problem, right? I mean, with the, say, just a bunch of Linux clients, the page size is basically your boundary, but that's completely undefined. That's just implementation specific bits, and other implementations have different ranges. So I guess we need some way to figure out how to deal with that, how to export it to applications, how to communicate it between clients and servers. And maybe we can roll it out where we say, if you really write inside that same stripe, the write goes to the MDS, just don't do it. But that needs a proper protocol. And at that point, you've probably solved the nastiest problem here, and the rest can become much, much better. But we probably need to just define the problem first.
Yeah, that's a fair observation, Christoph. I mean, that is what's come out of the last 3 or 4 meetings, is the fact that we're violating a core tenet, which is the last writer wins, and it's hard to do. It's hard.
Yeah, and I think you need to work with your company, your customer, whoever wants to do that, to figure out what the expected semantics at a high level are, define them for NFS and PNFS in general, and then you can start building your parity to support these well-defined semantics, instead of trying to make something work that's vague and counter to the normal NFS assumptions.
Okay.
So I'm in queue with Chris Anacio with chair hat off. Can you go back to the operations? Can you describe a little bit more about like what it means for chunk repair and
Oh, so if
I mean, I kind of know what they mean, but I what are the implications of that?
yeah, so we'd actually talked about this several times ago, but the point is that one of the clients both noticed that another client wrote on one of the DSs to the same chunk. So with a distributed algorithm, we would decide which one gets to repair it, and I don't want that. So what we've done is said, we're going to inform the MDS that there is a problem with this chunk, and the MDS is going to pick one of the clients to go fix the problem.
And then there has to be some notices back from the MDS to the client, like so.
So the CB chunk repair, that's a callback on the back channel that the MDS sends to inform one of the clients that they're now responsible for fixing the issue.
So it does tell. So sorry. So the data server.
The client tells the metadata server there's an issue. The metadata server picks a client or a DS to fix it and uses CB chunk repair to send a message saying, go fix this chunk.
Okay, so sorry. So my big hang up was that on the slide it says informs the DS, but it could be the DS/client.
Yes.
Okay. That makes more sense to me. I'm still nervous about the cost of, I mean, hopefully these are incredibly rare events, but the cost seems potentially expensive, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah. So in distributed consensus making, one of the approaches is to centralize who makes the decision about doing the repair or doing the consensus.
And I mean, I think even having to do that is a failure of the protocol. I mean, I'm more familiar with local rate than distributed, but at the time you have concurrent updates that make your fundamental on this data structure inconsistent, you've dug yourself such a big hole that is almost impossible to get out of, because before that repair hits in, your data structure is inconsistent. So maybe if you actually lock the metadata somewhere, you might have a good copy, but you need to redirect everyone there. And at this point, it's just really downhill for there.
So Christoph, there's two main areas of repair. One is both the clients are active; they just did the write, they're racing, so that can be resolved. The other one is some client comes in and does a read and notices that it's not consistent, so it says, "Hey, can someone please go repair this for me?"
Well, that's two very different cases, and I would really not use the same terms for it.
Okay.
And the first one is one you really need to avoid. You need to grant layouts to entire stripes, because once you have concurrent writers to the same stripe, it just can't work at all. And this goes back to figure out what we do with concurrent writers.
Okay.
And the other is basically like that kicks off a scrub operation, which might also get kicked off if no one notices it, just as a background operation, because you don't trust your data to not lose it. So that's important, and it's something that needs to be driven by the MDS, and the MDS can get notified by a client, but you definitely don't want to have other writers to that going on at the same time, which reverts back to the...
Oh, so in the approach I've given, if there's a write in progress and we haven't finalized the data, then there will not be another write allowed until it's fixed.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, there should not be another writer, because, as I said, this is what really gets you into trouble.
Yeah.
Looks like the queue's empty.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm busy switching slide decks. Rick, if you're still awake.
Sort of. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yep.
Do you want slide control from your client, or do you want me to forward it for you?
I don't care. Whatever works for you.
I will go ahead and pass it to you, and if that doesn't work, just tell me.
Okay. So pretty simple draft. Basically 4 new attributes that are meant to deal with the problem of POSIX draft ACLs. True form refers to the form of ACL, or the model, or whatever you want to call it, that's attached to each file object, such as the POSIX draft ACL on the file object, or an NFSV4 ACL on the file object. The 4 attributes, I'll go into them a little more, but anyway. Okay, that worked. Oh, yes. Okay, so the rationale for doing this is some servers, like the Linux KNFSD, uses the POSIX draft ACL as its true form, and then it does an inexact mapping between the NFSV4 ACL and the POSIX draft ACL. That inexact mapping I don't think has worked particularly well over the years. It's caused confusion. You can set an ACL to a certain value, get it back, and you get back something quite different. So I propose that this extension allows direct manipulation of the POSIX draft ACL, basically. And I suggest that it might make a wider adoption of the use of ACLs, because they don't seem to be used all that much these days. And of course, David Novak is attacking the problem of the under specification of NFSV4 ACLs that has resulted in them being underused.
Well, that's not the only reason, but you're
Well,
right.
yeah.
There's multiple reasons.
Yes, there's many reasons. Um, I, I think Dave's talking about his later. I'll mention that later. But anyway, okay. So the true form is the type of ACL actually stored on the file object and used for access permission checking. Um, the scope is just whether it's per file system, or per server. Um, the per file case is a little odd, but IBM's GPFS does do it. So I tried to cover it in the draft. I don't have any hands-on experience with that case, so it's rather difficult to be sure that what I've currently got will actually work correctly. Did Chris want to make a comment?
Well, yeah, sorry, I was just raising the hand. I really think from the client point of view that the per file version is dangerous because it means your directory and your file can be out of sync, which leads to all kinds of trouble. But we don't really have to discuss this now before the adoption call. And the other thing, while I'm on there for the true form, is I think it really needs to be a tri-state because there's plenty of servers where neither NFS4-ish ECLs nor POSIX ECLs are the right thing, but because they might not have any access control at all or something really weird that we don't want to get into.
Well, you can simply set it as none.
Or you
were
can just
you
not support
suggesting-
that attribute if it's not right.
It's still useful information that your server is nice enough to tell you that it's weird and not just old. Both can be true.
So you're suggesting there should be a fourth option that's other or something like that?
Yeah, other, unknown, unspecified,
Okay.
something.
Yeah, that's easily added. David Novak was one of the people who thought that the per file variant was useful. I don't know if he wants to comment on that.
Well, I can, yeah. If you have, well, I think we have now support the NFSV4 ACL model, and I think we would definitely implement this if it's approved. But if you think about the conversion problem in that environment, I think it'll be necessary to allow people to change that and on a profile basis. And I think the issue about inconsistency between the file and directory is worth discussing. But as has been said before, we can do that later. That'll be let's say I'm assuming this draft is going to be adopted, and it should be adopted, and then we'll discuss these issues later.
Okay, so anyway, when the two form is the POSIX draft model. Oh, Christoph, go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe I misunderstood Dave, but it sounded to me like he wants set editor to actually change the true form attribute that is dynamically switching between the models, and that if that's what I heard, that actually makes the current problem worse. Dave, did I misunderstand this, hopefully, or not?
Well, I'm not sure what the problem you see. Okay, yes, it could change it, but it would change. I was assumed that you could set either of them, and therefore go with this situation where you have this as Rick said, and change it and convert. So that's what I see happening, and I think
and that's actually really problematic because now your client that previously knew on a per server or per file system's the interesting one, but if all the same server, it's not any worse. Knows what ACL model it deals with and can set up everything for it. But now if it's not just per file, but can change basically any time on a per file basis, there's nothing the client can prepare for, and it's in a complete mess because it can't basically be flip-flopping around. And the way I understood it is, say, if you have a Windows-ish and Linux client or whatever access it, and they just keep updating the permissions and it keeps flip-flopping, it's just madness.
Well,
All right, I
right.
see your point, but I think we need a way, a reasonable way for people to convert from the current environment, which we've got ourselves into, to something else.
But that's
I
really
think
an
we'll just go on.
administrative decision. You do that on the server out of bounds of the NFS protocol. And if you have an older file server that you upgrade and you want to do it, you do it through the server administration and not through random client action, because that leaves you in an
Okay,
undefined
as
landscape
I've
where
often been a
you're
client, I don't think that you can. It's fair to just say whatever he does is quote random. I think who else is going to do it? Who else knows what he wants but the client?
Well, I mean, I can think of two scenarios, and that's probably not all of them, right? You have a Linux server that just has POSIX ACLs as the backend or some other server. You're just always going to expose it to a client that negotiated that it supports it, period. The other thing is you have a multi-protocol file server that a bunch of companies active in the working group built, and you just have your server administrative setup where you say, for this exported file system, I want Linux semantics or I want Windows semantics, and you just stick to it, and the other client has to cope like it has right now.
Okay, all right. Well, that's work with a new file system, but we have new file systems. This is not, I know whose fault it is. It doesn't matter. We just have a situation where we have a chromiacal model that we need to, some people want to maintain it and some people want to convert. And I think that's the problem.
Then that's fine. And if your product upgrades to a version that supports it, your upgrade guide says, if you want to convert from the NFS4 to the POSIX ACL model, here is the steps you need to take. And for any newly created volume, here's a checkbox or an option in the command line or whatever.
Well, the problem is that implies a mapping, and as
well, there is a
Rick was
mapping,
nice enough to
obviously
say,
a good
inexact
one, but
mapping. This is a piece of crap, you know.
I mean,
Mapping.
honestly, if you think it's not worth to support the upgrade, that's a perfectly fine option too. I'm pretty sure some users will ask for it, but we're getting into product decisions, and no one forced you to support it, but you already supported the imperfect mapping. Well, you didn't, but the client did, so you might as well do the same mapping the client you're optimizing for did, because that's what it expects.
All right, I'm gonna. I mean, I'm happy.
Okay, I just want to make
but
it clear that nothing we've discussed so far shouldn't prevent this from being adopted. Is there anyone who does not think we should adopt this draft?
So this was absolutely not to talk against adoption. I'm all for adoption. It was just an interesting thing that the slides brought up, and maybe we shouldn't have.
I just want to make sure the chairs are clear on that.
No, the part you didn't miss at the beginning of the meeting when you had some technical issues was that the chairs think that this is, we already put that adoption call to rest and said this is going to be adopted.
Okay,
Sorry,
okay. I will note that Bruce Fields off list did note to me that he thought the per file case was confusing and he didn't understand why it was in there. And I said, well, IBM's GPFS apparently already does it, so I put it in as best I could. So obviously it's still a point of contention and it will need further discussion. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Rick, quick question, I guess maybe as chair, which is at the Bake-a-thons, does IBM show up? I mean, is there an ability to do any interrupt there?
no, they don't. Apparently, Ganesha does use IBM GPFS, but unfortunately, Frank hadn't run one in a long time, so he wasn't able to give me semantic information about it. One of the problems with the Bake-a-thon is, yes, you don't see these things at the Bake-a-thon.
Thanks.
Okay, do I continue on?
Yep.
Let's see. That's probably just basic information for people in case you haven't heard about it. The first statement is, of course, may be disputable as well. The current draft doesn't try and describe the semantics of POSIX draft ACLs. It defers it to the Usenix paper, which was published. And unfortunately, the unpublished draft exists, but how do you describe it as an unpublished draft and reference it? And the actual structure of the only thing that's at all questionable is the third item. Obviously, POSIX discusses it in terms of UIDs and GIDs. This is handled by the hoof string and assumed in this mapped in the same form as other parts of NFSV4. Tom or whoever's talking.
Yeah, Rick. So you can work with me. We can get it to be a non-normative reference. I can help you with that.
Okay, chair hat on, that might not work, and we may need to do something with that. When that time comes, I will work with our helpful AD. You can't have certain references to non-normative documents in a standards track document if it impacts the normative text of your standard.
Oh, I've seen examples against this in the past.
Yeah, well, I definitely had a draft delayed for a long time because of that, and we ended up just writing the proper normative text ourselves. And I think that's the right thing to do, and reuse whatever we can have from Andreas. I know him personally pretty closely. I can talk to him. He's back at the same employer where he wrote that document, which might make things easier.
I mean, that's the classic down ref that the RFC. No, we'll have our helpful AD give us the real law.
No, we won't. Your helpful AD said, "Be careful here. This is the place you don't want to go and ask your AD. So please work out something that has references to normative stuff, to real references that are normative, examples to whatever examples you have. And if you need external documents, then please be very careful about how you write that, because this is really going to annoy not me, but all the other people with yellow dots on when they come to review this."
And as I said before, I think the right thing here is to not have any kind of normative reference, but in all the semantics we rely on. We might be able to use that document, like reuse from the document when talking to Andreas and Red Hat. And we can still put it in as a non-normative reference that it's based on that, but not as a normative reference.
Gory back. Yes. Copying text in to make this a real normative statement, and then saying here's the source, and then saying that that's fuzzy, but that's okay.
Okay, so a couple of issues that have come up. The first one was dealing with verify and n-verify. If the ACL, the first two attributes are no problem, but if the ACL attributes are being handled by these, they have to be compared. At the moment, the draft says the server either has the option of returning inval and just not doing the comparison, or it recommends that the comparison allow the same set of aces, but in different order to be considered the same. That's because POSIX draft ACLs, the semantics isn't based on ordering of aces. And it also suggests that, I don't remember how strong the language was, that the comparison be done after the who string is mapped to the UIG and UID, because that's what a POSIX draft ACL actually uses. So I guess I'll need more feedback on whether that seems to be the appropriate solution, or whether Other alternatives are just require the servers to do it. The concern about that is the comparison is a fair amount of work and would require a large amount of implementation in the Linux KNFSD, or just always allow it invalid, which is easy, but I believe Chuck Lever felt that allowing it was a better alternative. Christoph has,
Yeah,
yes,
so
there he
I
is.
mean, I tried to recap that long discussion we had on that, and let me correct me if I'm wrong. I think the important part to make server implementations life easier is to not require it. If we allow it or not is probably irrelevant because no one's going to do it. Or do I misremember the discussion?
Yes, I think that's consistent what it says now. A server just can return nval. And as you say, I don't know if any server ever will do it or every client will ever want to do it. So, but it was Chuck Lever that was the main person that I think felt we should allow it to happen.
Yeah, I think we should have another discussion with Chuck. I think we'd make our life easier if we don't allow it, if we don't think anyone's ever going to do it, because that just increases the size of the document in potential validation. But if that's
Right.
the only thing that would block Chuck from consenting to getting the draft done, I think we'll have to live with it.
Okay. So this one, one person has commented that this specification changes the definition of the group bits in mode, which technically it does, and that happens already as far as I can see it. It definitely happens inside the Linux KNFSD because it does the mapping to the POSIX draft ACL. And then the POSIX draft ACL sets the group bits to the mask. It's never been obvious to me that the relationship between mode bits and ACLs is well defined for NFSV4 ACLs either. And in fact, one of the many areas that I think Dave Novak is trying to attack is how to deal with that. Anyway, his proposal is to have two sets of group mode bits, but I don't understand it. I'll honestly I can't
Well,
see.
I also
two
don't
sets of
understand
mode
it. And it's not your problem. I think
bits.
I've had this discussion with Polly about it, and I just couldn't understand what his objection was. And maybe if I don't really think there's a clear reason to have two sets. So maybe we have to have a further discussion with Polly, but I just don't see it right now.
Yeah, so Christoph chiming in, having two is really not, I mean, two at the same time is not going to help anyone. I mean, if there are fully to the spec implementations of the bit as defined in the NFS4 ACLs, we need to preserve that for the NFS4 ACL case, obviously, but there's really no reason to bring it over to the POSIX ACL semantics. The interesting thing, and I don't have an answer, I'm just bringing it up based on this slide, is if using the group bit as specified in the POSIX draft ACLs with NFS4 ACLs is very common, we might as well have another attribute that tells the client that this is the case, because maybe clients are already trying to figure that out somehow. But maybe that's also overkill or something for Dave's draft.
Well, I suppose the ACL true form would do that in the sense that the true form attribute would be set to none, or you're suggesting as other, in which case the client would know that there's no POSIX draft ACL that's changing the mode bits to the math, the group bits, if that makes sense.
I'll just note that.
And the last one's blank, so we're done.
I'll just note that Christoph gave you the thumbs up on that comment, Rick.
Yeah.
I'll also, just from a chair, that was a good discussion, and I'm sure Brian is busy putting that in the notes. It's good text to somehow add to the draft about what the mode bits mean in those cases.
I am writing stuff into the minutes. I was going to ask Rick, from the conversation, could you seed a mail, a discussion on the mail list of the things that we just touched on from your perspective? That would help me, because I don't think I captured all of them, but I will go through the recording after this.
Well, I don't recall any email discussion on the other or unknown default case. That's easy to add. That was Christoph today. Polly's discussion on 2 mode bits has definitely been on the mailing list multiple times.
Okay.
And I believe the discussion by Chuck related to verify and n-verify is also on the mailing list. I don't think it was just email to me.
Well, I know, but I think Brian is asking to summarize. There's lots of things that you can go through, but
then there was the discussion we had about
ask people to look to do that research.
Yeah, sorry, and we did have the discussion on the, let's call it, viability of file-based ACLs versus directory ACLs, and then also ACL conversion. And who owns that? That came up too. So those were the things that we just touched on, that we said aren't preventing adoption, but probably need resolution and closure.
Okay, so essentially you're saying that I need to send an email to the working group mailing list asking for further discussion on these.
Yes. Please.
Okay, good. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it's me.
It is. Do you want control of the slides, Dave, or you just want to tell me next?
I don't know how to control the slides in this thing, so.
All right, then you can tell me.
All right. Well, this is the title. It says it's in Madrid, but I'm not in Madrid, and it's really dark out here. Anyway, so let's go on to the next slide. All right, let me talk about this effort, which has been going on for a number of years. We needed a BIS document for v4.1. We got one for v4.0, and that happened about 10 years after the original 3530 was published. Anyway, in the process of doing this, we decided that some of this was, because 0 and 1 were the same, needed to involve some NFSV4 wide documents, and that's part of this effort. So what we did was we dealt with tons of errata. It's less than 100, but it's many dozens. Anyway, then we found some things that we just had to deal with, like internationalization was just a mess. Now, the original one in v4.0, that was the fault of IESG, but the fact that it's wrong in v4.1 is really our fault somehow. We never fixed that. Anyway, we have a security section. There's no threat analysis. And as Rick has mentioned, the messed up approach to ACLs. And, originally it was felt that POSIX draft ACLs, because they were somehow smaller, could be covered by NFE4 but ACLs, and that turned out not to be the case. So what we decided to do is make it clear that there was currently one form of ACLs, but there could be multiple ones, and Rick's document will take that up. And we also had some unimplementable v4.1 features. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. All right, so I've written a ton of documents. Some of that is just copying code, but there's now 1,000 pages, at least 1,000 pages of documents total. So I've got that written, but we've lagged in two things. There hasn't been the discussion we should have had about some of this, and certainly there's some administrative problems about which I'll allude to later about what's going on. Anyway, we had a big set of problems that we inherited from v4.0. There was no discussion of authorization semantics, and I think that's fixed in the security document. And the lack of another also addresses the implications of auth-sys, the bad ACL compromise. That's Rick's word, and string prep based initialization, which never worked. So on to the next slide. Okay, in v4.1 was made some great improvements that we never planned on making in the session model. I think that was basically driven by Mike Geisler. But in the rush to get v4.1 dealt, it turns out there were two features that were published but were never implemented. And the persistent reply cache was never implemented because what's written in the document just isn't implemented. And the directory delegations, which is important, we noticed there are performance issues, and there's some gaps, which we've addressed in that makes it clear the value of this and how it could be implemented. And so that's the other thing. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. So the problems that we have for this effort, which we now have like a year to finish because of the target date for RFC 5661 BIS, is, well, people haven't read these documents. They're long. You can't diff these documents with RFC 8881. But anyway, I've made some effort in the appendix to make clear what the differences are that people have to discuss. Anywhere, I understand why people have had trouble doing this, but we do have to focus on this. This work has to be done. There isn't any real alternative. We can't. It's already been more than 15 years since 5661 was published, and we need to clean some of this stuff up. All right, now we have some document administration problems. That we have documents that have lost in the adoption process or working group last call. And so working group leadership needs to address those issues, and that's now changed. Even I don't know why or when Zahid left and Goris. But in any case, that's now the job of, I can't make that happen. But somehow the chairs and Gore have to help here. Anyway, let's go on.
So Dave,
Next slide.
Yeah.
Do you have questions?
I do. So I guess with chair hat on, so 5661 is obsoleted by 8881.
That's correct.
And I know you had technical issues at the front, but I actually had a slide kind of to this point. We probably shouldn't be doing a 5661 BIS document, and we should be doing it, at a minimum, what it would take to rename this to be 8881 BIS.
We could rename it, but the essence is the essence. If we've been calling this so long, it would be difficult to change. But basically, it would obsolete RFC 8881. I think that's clear.
Wait, so if it's obsoleting 8881,
right?
Okay, there's going to be a conversation about that.
I imagine so.
Yeah. To the other point, I'm happy to sit down with kind of AD on the line and talk about, you know, your version of issues, but not in this meeting. We can set something up, you know, some other time.
Sure.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so, all right, can we move on? All right, so I just want to point the target date for this is July 2026, and that's already pretty late, and we can't let it slip endlessly. So this document itself, RFC 5661, this is pretty far along, and the review of the changes section should be doable, but I say to the working group as a whole that I understand why people don't want to do that, but we have to at least go through the appendices where I say things and people have to say, well, we have to say, if there's an issue, bring it up now. It's been 16 years since RFC 5661 was published, and there's no real alternative to fixing the spec. So we have to get on with this. Okay, this is the document summary. In more or less green is RFC 5661 bis, which we might rename RFC 8881 bis. Internationalization has been done. There's no issues with, and for some reason that no one can determine, I can't determine anyway. It's been in working group last call for many months, maybe years. I don't know. I haven't researched it. So it someone needs to tell me what's wrong with it, what needs to be fixed, or let's go ahead with it. So then there are also 3 documents.
My mic is off. All right, Dave. So for internationalization, boy, that wasn't Dublin, was it? It was the meeting before, right? So we don't have consensus in the working group on the last call with regards to internationalization. Does a reference to 5661 as well, which is, you know, obsoleted. Update the reference on what you're updating on the internationalization doc to 8881. That will hopefully overcome the objections of various members within the working group of how far back the internationalization doc goes, and then we can move it out of last call to publication.
Okay.
And I know you had technical issues at the beginning of the meeting, and we did kind of cover some of these topics. Right, which is with regards to the 5661 bis document, you know, at least in the chair's opinion, it makes sense to move it to 8881 bis. It's very hard to review in its current state, and it's not getting the reviews necessary to progress the document. And one of those is that we would like to be able to work in smaller size chunks to work through the document, and we would like to adopt the GitHub workflow to enable the working group to make progress.
Well, I'm kind of clueless about GitHub, so we'll need some help with that.
We can do that, but so that's kind of the instant summary of the part of the meeting you missed. Let me switch back to your deck now. All right, what is that slide? You're on 7. Do you want to go to 8?
All right, these 3 documents, security, ACLs, and 5662 bis. Now, there is no 8882 bis, so it would still have to be 5662 bis. So those 3 documents, adoption calls, there have been multiple adoption calls, but never been results of them. Never heard back what needs to be fixed or what objections there were. or adoption. So we need, I think it's clear that these need to be adopted. There's never been any objection to them being adopted, but we have to proceed on that issue. All right, I guess we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, now I think we've heard some problems, but they seem pretty minor. But anyway, I have a draft 11. Now I have a draft 12 ready. It was held up by. Maybe I'll call that 8881 bis, and I'll have to change a lot of references, other documents that reference it. So that's a big deal, but I probably could do that in the next month. I'm working on -12. There was discussion on the list of unsupported attributes in reader, and I had a response on the list, but I have to change the thing and the document to match that. I think there's no disagreement about it. There's another big issue that having to do with the PNF description of the forgetful model, and I'm working on that, and that'll take. So I think we'll have a new draft of that probably within a couple of weeks of now. So as far as the working group review, I want to point out that despite the claim that this is difficult to review, anyway, there are pointers about the issues that need to be addressed in Appendix C, and I would ask whatever our workflow is, we use that as a guide to things that need to be addressed. Okay, on to the next slide. All right, internationalization. I think some minor issues would do. I will fix the whole thing. I'm not sure about the reference to 50. It doesn't say that it updates 56 or obsoletes it. I think it does cite the history of how this happened, and these original problems were caused when 5661 was written, and it has to be clear that we're not that we were referring to 5661 in a historical way, and that RFC 881 is the thing that's obsoleted. So I think there will be in the next few weeks something addressing that issue. All right. All right. Security. I think it's a question of, if anybody think there's a reason that this should not be adopted, we should do something else, I would ask that person to say that and say what else we will do. I don't have that, and I think we just have to go on this or not. Let's go on to the next slide.
So just a question on this. Who has offered to review and work on this? Is that something that's been discussed in the working group and got feedback?
It has at the that was Dublin, wasn't it? That was the handoff between you and Zahed?
It was about the handoff between me and Zahed.
Yeah. So we actually had a conversation about doing an adoption call for security. We ended it in Dublin, and there was basically a negative result to adopt from the working group.
So I didn't see the energy.
I never heard about that.
Yeah, okay. So we need people to offer to review and contribute to it, and then we can do the adoption call. On the other one, the AD and chairs will catch up on the list of documents, the list of things we're working on. We'll have a discussion, and we'll try and figure out a roadmap through for which ones are the highest priority and the most energy behind, and we'll get back on that after this meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, and next slide. All right, ACLs. I think I saw the note about the adoption, so I think we have to proceed with an adoption call on that. I think it's generally felt, that I think that fits in well with the work that Rick has done, and I think that needs to be adopted too. Anyway, let's go on. Okay.
So, David,
as I said, it needs work. Appendix A tells the things that where it needs to be reviewed. But basically, I've had to change direction on this. At first, I thought, well, somehow we could expand the NFSV4 ACL model so it includes the draft, and that turned out to be unworkable. And so what happened is I just was clear that these are different models, and then Rick filled in that gap by his proposal. I think these work well together. All right. Next is the last thing that
this is ACLS has a current adoption call, as you noted. There's some emails from you on that I asked. There's some emails to you on list about kind of if you could kind of restate a quick summary and kind of reposition the document with respect to the POSIX ACLS draft on list, and so that we can get that.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, now RFC 5662 bis. There's no 8882, but we do need, for a number of reasons, a bis, just as we did RFC 7531. Some of the same reasons. So I think that needs to. I've asked a number of times that one adoption call, it was rejected because I think Tom felt that he wasn't clear about the propriety of the changes, and I think I addressed that in the subsequent draft. And so I think we need to have that discussion again, maybe, and just make sure that that one's okay and go on with that one. So that's the end of the slide deck. Okay.
And maybe Tom, Christoph, because I kind of just checked my recollection here, which is I think some of the feedback on 62 bis was that we have 61 bis. It's a monster. We don't have bandwidth, motivation, energy, or whatever to take on 62 bis. Do I have the right recollection, or am I?
Not with the current process where it's huge dumps that change a lot of things. And if we actually did an incremental version controlled approach, I think that would highly increase the chances of working group members that are knowledgeable in the area touched to review it.
Well, I don't think 6662 bits is not that long, and there's no way to divide it up. If someone wants to GitHub it, I'm okay with that. So maybe we'll just do that.
So Gori, back at the mic. I think, if I understood the suggestion, just to be sure, the question was, can we carve up the review and changes rather than carve up the document into multiple documents? And GitHub maybe is a way to kind of do those issues, make some changes, make it very clear what those changes are and discuss them, and then just fold them back, and the document can proceed piecewise with different people having eyes on different parts. Was I kind of on the right?
Yeah, I mean, this is how we do software development and other specs, is right. You start with a known baseline, which would be the last published, like 5881, last documented BIS document, and then change things as we go along, addressing erratas. Don't add a lot of rambling notes in the document. That's what the commit messages are really, really useful for. And that way you can have working group members that know a certain area look over changes touching that, or the generalists looking at general typography or whatever changes, and actually give people a chance to review it instead of having huge dumps that change a lot of things and are unreviewable.
So yeah, I've seen that work really well in some working groups. Really, really well. And it also involves a few people to just walk into the room who have expertise on something or a question about something to comment on that thing, which is always nice to get new people.
Agreed. Okay.
Okay, that's done.
And that was the end of our agenda. We are now in the agenda bash and comment suggestions part. So I heard Dave at least make one reference to an interim meeting. We have typically done interim meetings, but in between this last set, we did not do interim meetings. I'm willing to hear feedback from the working group of, do we want to do them again? Do we want to do them a little less often and have them? Do we not want them? What works for people? What working group chairs are here to enable? What can we do?
Tom Haynes, the biggest problem I had with the interim meetings is they went on and on. There were no action items per meeting. There was nothing resolved in the documents. I would want us to,
be more formal about the interim meeting process. I will say, as a chair with a different full-time job, I'll take ownership of that shortcoming.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy about every meeting I don't have to attend. And to be fair, I basically did not attend the interim meetings also because the scheduling didn't work for me. If we had a very well-defined agenda that's needed to bring something forward and I can make the time happen, I would join one, but on the regular recurring cadence, I don't see a chance to actually attend.
That's good feedback to know.
Okay. I think probably there's definitely a need for a meeting like a month before the IETF meeting to prepare for it. I think it's hard to set that up without some discussion before that. Just all of a sudden, I get up at 5 in the morning and have to deal with this meeting. So that experience may have colored my view, but I think we do need at least some, not a lot of interims, but at least one before the next full meeting.
I can happily bring this kind of conversation to the list, but I do appreciate the feedback I've heard here. Anyone else? We're on the random topics part at this point. We have 2 minutes, which I'll happily give back to you if you so desire. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, day, however much longer you're spending in Madrid in Spain, or if you're at home, potentially go back to bed.
Hasta luego, vaya con Dios.
See you in Montreal, everyone.
Parlez-vous français? Okay.
See you in Montreal. Yeah.